Professor Charles Whitmore stood at the podium of the packed auditorium at Princeton University, delivering what many considered to be one of the most important lectures on theoretical physics in the past decade. At 78, he remained the undisputed authority on quantum field theory, his silver hair and dignified bearing commanding respect from colleagues worldwide. The Nobel Prize he had won 15 years earlier sat prominently in his office, but those who knew him understood that his greatest pride came from the generations of brilliant physicists he had mentored throughout his career. In the third row, 24-year-old Rebecca Martinez sat transfixed, her notebook filled with careful annotations and diagrams. As a graduate student in theoretical physics, she had dreamed of studying under Professor Whitmore since her undergraduate days at MIT. His groundbreaking work on particle interactions had inspired her to pursue physics, and now, incredibly, she was not only attending his lectures, but working as his research assistant. Rebecca's journey to Princeton had been remarkable. The daughter of Mexican immigrants who ran a small restaurant in East Los Angeles, she had shown extraordinary aptitude for mathematics and science from an early age. Her parents, Maria and Carlos Martinez, had worked double shifts to pay for her education, believing deeply in the American dream of advancement through learning. Rebecca had earned full scholarships throughout her academic career, graduating summa cum laude from MIT before being accepted into Princeton's prestigious physics program. When Professor Whitmore had selected her as his research assistant from among dozens of qualified candidates, Rebecca had felt as though she was living a dream. For the past 2 years, she had worked closely with him on cutting-edge research into quantum entanglement, contributing original insights that had impressed even the professor's most skeptical colleagues. What made the situation even more special was the relationship Rebecca had developed with Professor Whitmore's wife, Margaret. At 75, Margaret Whitmore was a retired literature professor who had taught at Princeton for over 40 years. She possessed a sharp wit, boundless curiosity, and a warmth that had made her beloved by generations of students and faculty wives. Margaret had taken an immediate liking to Rebecca when Charles first brought her home for dinner 2 years earlier. Perhaps she saw something of her younger self in the brilliant, determined young woman who had overcome significant obstacles to pursue her passion for science. Margaret had been one of the few women in academia in the 1960s and understood the challenges Rebecca faced as a Latina woman in a field still dominated by white men. "My dear," Margaret had said during that first dinner, "Charles tells me you're working on quantum entanglement theory. How fascinating. You know, I've always thought there were parallels between quantum physics and literature, the way meaning can exist in multiple states until observed and interpreted." Rebecca had been charmed by Margaret's intelligence and warmth. Soon, she was spending Sunday afternoons at the Whitmore house, ostensibly to discuss research with the professor, but increasingly to enjoy long conversations with Margaret about books, art, and life. Margaret became something of a surrogate mother figure, someone Rebecca could confide in about the pressures of graduate school and the challenges of being one of the few women in her program. The Whitmores had been married for 52 years, their relationship a model of intellectual partnership and deep affection. They had never had children, instead pouring their parental instincts into mentoring countless students over the decades. Their home was always filled with young academics, lively debates, and the aroma of Margaret's excellent cooking. Charles often marveled at how naturally Rebecca fit into their household dynamic. She was respectful but not intimidated by his reputation, intellectually curious but humble about her own considerable abilities. She helped Margaret in the kitchen, contributed thoughtfully to dinner conversations that ranged from physics to politics to poetry, and treated both Whitmores with genuine affection rather than mere professional deference. "That girl is special," Margaret told Charles one evening after Rebecca had left following a particularly engaging discussion about the intersection of science and philosophy. "She reminds me of you when you were young, brilliant but still hungry to learn, confident but not arrogant." Charles nodded thoughtfully. She's one of the most promising students I've ever worked with. Her insights into non-local correlations are genuinely original. I think she could make significant contributions to the field. I think she already has, Margaret replied with a knowing smile. To the field and to us personally. Rebecca's research progressed remarkably under Charles's guidance. Her doctoral thesis on quantum entanglement applications was generating excitement throughout the physics community, with several major journals expressing interest in publishing her findings. Charles took pride in her achievements while maintaining the professional distance appropriate to their mentor-student relationship. However, those closest to them couldn't help but notice the intellectual chemistry between the distinguished professor and his brilliant protege. Their research sessions often extended far beyond scheduled hours, not because either was avoiding other commitments, but because their collaborative thinking seemed to generate insights that neither could achieve alone. Margaret observed these interactions with interest rather than concern. She trusted her husband completely and understood that great scientific partnerships often involved intense intellectual intimacy. More than that, she genuinely loved Rebecca like a daughter and wanted to see her succeed in every aspect of life. The dynamic of their unusual household continued peacefully until Margaret's health began to decline during Rebecca's 4th year at Princeton. Initially, the symptoms were subtle: increased fatigue, occasional memory lapses, minor coordination issues. Margaret, ever the stoic academic, dismissed these as normal signs of aging and refused to slow her active schedule. Charles was more concerned, insisting that Margaret see specialists for comprehensive evaluation. The diagnosis, when it came, was devastating: early-stage Alzheimer's disease with an aggressive progression pattern. The doctors estimated that Margaret might have 2 to 3 years before the disease significantly impaired her cognitive abilities. Margaret received the news with characteristic grace and practicality. "Well," she said to Charles and Rebecca during a family meeting with her neurologist, "at least we know what we're dealing with. We can plan accordingly." Rebecca was heartbroken by the diagnosis. Margaret had become so important to her that the thought of losing her brilliant mind and warm companionship was almost unbearable. She immediately began researching Alzheimer's treatments and support systems, determined to help in any way possible. "Rebecca, dear," Margaret said during one of their Sunday afternoon conversations, "I need to talk to you about something important." They were sitting in Margaret's study, surrounded by the books that had been her life's passion. Margaret's condition was still relatively mild, but she was having more frequent episodes of confusion and word-finding difficulties. "I've been thinking about the future," Margaret continued carefully. "About Charles, and what will happen to him when I'm no longer able to be his partner in the way I've been for 52 years. Rebecca felt uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. "Mrs. Whitmore, you're going to be fine for a long time. The treatments." Margaret waved her hand dismissively. "Rebecca, we both know that's not true. I've read the research. I understand the prognosis. I'm not asking for false comfort. I'm asking for your help with something important." Rebecca nodded, unsure of what Margaret might request. "Charles is going to need someone who understands his work, who can engage with his mind the way I have. He's going to need intellectual companionship and emotional support. Most importantly, he's going to need someone to love him the way he deserves to be loved." Rebecca's heart began racing as she sensed where this conversation was leading. Margaret continued, "I've watched you two together for the past 4 years. I've seen how your minds complement each other, how you bring out the best in his thinking. But more than that, I've seen how you care for each other, how you both light up when the other is around. Mrs. Whitmore, I don't think—" "Rebecca, listen to me. I love my husband more than anything in this world. That's exactly why I want him to have a chance at happiness after I'm gone. And I love you like the daughter we never had. If you two could find happiness together, it would be the answer to my prayers." Rebecca was speechless, overwhelmed by the implications of what Margaret was suggesting. "I'm not asking you to make any decisions now," Margaret said gently. I'm just asking you to be open to the possibility. When the time comes, and it will come sooner than any of us would like, please don't let some misguided sense of propriety prevent you both from finding love again. Over the following months, Margaret's condition deteriorated more rapidly than anyone had hoped. Her brilliant mind, which had analyzed literature and human nature with extraordinary insight for decades, began to fade in devastating increments. Charles devoted himself to her care, taking a sabbatical from teaching to spend as much time as possible with his wife while she was still herself. Rebecca helped in every way she could, managing household tasks, coordinating with medical professionals, and providing companionship to both Charles and Margaret. The experience deepened her relationships with both Whitmores, creating bonds that went far beyond professional or academic connections. During Margaret's lucid moments, she continued to encourage Rebecca and Charles to consider their future together. Her suggestions were never pushy or inappropriate, but rather gentle observations about their compatibility and mutual affection. You know, Margaret said to Charles one evening as Rebecca helped prepare dinner, I was thinking about quantum entanglement today. How two particles can be connected across vast distances, affecting each other instantaneously. It reminds me of love, the way two people can be bound together in ways that transcend ordinary understanding. Charles understood the metaphor and its implications. He had been struggling with his own feelings for Rebecca, emotions that had grown stronger as they spent more time together caring for Margaret. The age difference troubled him, as did the ethics of becoming romantically involved with his student. Yet he couldn't deny the deep connection he felt with her. Margaret died peacefully on a spring morning, surrounded by Charles and Rebecca. Her final words to them were characteristically thoughtful. Take care of each other. Love is too precious to waste on convention. The funeral was attended by hundreds of colleagues, former students, and friends from the academic community. Rebecca delivered one of the eulogies, speaking eloquently about Margaret's mentorship and the profound impact she had made on so many lives. In the months following Margaret's death, Charles struggled with grief and loneliness. Rebecca remained a constant presence, helping him manage daily tasks while completing her own dissertation research. Their relationship during this period was carefully platonic, both aware of the impropriety of romantic involvement so soon after Margaret's death. However, their intellectual and emotional connection continued to deepen. They found comfort in each other's company, understanding, and shared memories of Margaret. Colleagues and friends noticed their growing closeness, but were generally supportive, recognizing the genuine affection between them. Rebecca's dissertation defense was scheduled for the fall, 1 year after Margaret's death. Her research had evolved into groundbreaking work that would likely secure her position as one of the leading young physicists in her field. Several prestigious universities had already expressed interest in offering her faculty positions. The night after her successful defense, Charles and Rebecca sat in his study, celebrating her achievement with wine from a bottle Margaret had been saving for a special occasion. I'm so proud of you, Charles said, raising his glass. Margaret would be thrilled to see what you've accomplished. Rebecca smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. I wish she could have seen it. She was so encouraging, especially in those final months when everything felt overwhelming. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, both thinking about Margaret and the advice she had given them. Finally, Charles spoke carefully. Rebecca, I need to say something that I've been thinking about for months. I know this is complicated, given our professional relationship and the age difference. But I want you to know that my feelings for you have grown beyond those of a mentor or colleague. Rebecca's heart raced, but she had been expecting this conversation. Charles, I feel the same way. But I'm terrified of what people will think, what it might mean for both our careers. I've been struggling with the same concerns, Charles admitted. But Margaret made me promise to consider happiness over convention. She believed that love was rare enough that it shouldn't be sacrificed to social expectations. They talked late into the night, exploring their feelings, and discussing the practical implications of a romantic relationship. The age difference was significant, 54 years, but both felt that their intellectual compatibility and genuine affection transcended conventional concerns about appropriate partnerships. The academic community's reaction to their relationship was mixed when they began appearing together publicly 6 months later. Some colleagues were scandalized by the age gap and the apparent violation of professional boundaries. Others, particularly those who had known Margaret and witnessed the genuine love between all three of them, were more accepting. Charles has been alone for almost 2 years, observed Dr. Patricia Williams, Margaret's closest friend and a fellow literature professor. Margaret specifically told me she hoped he and Rebecca would find happiness together. Who are we to question her wishes? Rebecca faced particular scrutiny as a young woman who had seemingly married up in the academic world. Some suggested she was opportunistic, seeking to advance her career through association with a Nobel laureate. However, her research credentials were impeccable, and those who knew her understood that she could succeed on her own merits. Charles and Rebecca addressed these concerns directly by maintaining separate research projects and ensuring that Rebecca's career advancement was based solely on her own achievements. When she received multiple job offers from top universities, they chose Princeton's offer primarily because it allowed them to remain together while maintaining professional independence. Their engagement announcement came 2 years after Margaret's death, timed to coincide with Rebecca's appointment as an assistant professor at Princeton. The wedding was a small, elegant affair attended by close friends and colleagues who supported their union. Dr. Williams, representing Margaret's wishes, gave a toast that captured the complexity of their situation. Margaret loved Charles and Rebecca both, and she believed that love multiplies rather than divides. This marriage honors her memory while creating new possibilities for happiness. Their honeymoon was spent at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, where they attended a conference on quantum mechanics, a perfect blend of romance and intellectual stimulation that reflected their unique partnership. Marriage brought new dimensions to their relationship. Charles, at 81, found himself reinvigorated by Rebecca's youth and enthusiasm. She encouraged him to take on new research challenges and helped him navigate evolving technologies in their field. Rebecca, now 28, benefited from Charles's wisdom and experience while maintaining her independence as a researcher and teacher. Their home life was rich with intellectual discussion, scientific collaboration, and the comfortable rhythms of academic life. They often hosted dinner parties that brought together physicists, mathematicians, and scholars from other disciplines, continuing the tradition Margaret had established decades earlier. The age difference occasionally presented challenges, particularly regarding decisions about children. Rebecca was young enough to want a family, while Charles had concerns about becoming a father at his age. After extensive discussion, they decided to pursue adoption, eventually welcoming a brilliant 10-year-old girl whose parents had died in an accident. Sarah Chun brought new energy to their household and proved to be naturally gifted in mathematics and science. Having 2 physics professors as parents exposed her to extraordinary educational opportunities, and she thrived under their combined guidance. Charles's health remained good well into his 80s, aided by Rebecca's attentive care and his continued engagement with challenging research problems. Their collaborative work on quantum field applications earned recognition throughout the scientific community and demonstrated that their professional partnership was as successful as their personal one. The age gap became less noticeable as their marriage matured. Rebecca's colleagues and friends accepted Charles as simply her husband rather than an elderly professor who had married his student. Their love story became less scandalous and more inspiring as people witnessed their genuine compatibility and mutual respect. Rebecca's career flourished under Charles's mentorship and support. She received tenure at Princeton at an unusually young age and began developing her own reputation as a leading researcher in quantum physics. Her success validated her early promise and silenced critics who had suggested she was merely riding on Charles's reputation. When Charles received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Physical Society, his acceptance speech focused primarily on the importance of mentorship and the unexpected gifts that could emerge from academic relationships. The greatest discoveries in science, he said, often come not from individual brilliance, but from the collision of different perspectives and the courage to pursue understanding wherever it leads. My wife Rebecca has taught me that wisdom can flow in both directions between mentor and student, that love can transcend conventional boundaries, and that the most meaningful research happens when brilliant minds choose to work together. Rebecca, watching from the audience, was moved to tears by his recognition of their partnership. Later that evening, she reflected on how different her life had become from what she had originally imagined when she first entered graduate school. "I thought I was just pursuing a PhD in physics," she told Charles as they celebrated his award. "I had no idea I was also going to find the love of my life and a partner who would help me become the scientist I never dared dream I could be." Their story continued to evolve as Charles entered his late 80s and Rebecca her mid-30s. The age difference remained significant, but their shared intellectual life and deep emotional connection had created a bond that transcended physical years. They had become genuine partners in every sense, professionally, personally, and parentally. Sarah, now a teenager, had grown up thinking it was perfectly normal to have one parent in her 30s and another in his 80s. She was proud of both parents' accomplishments and understood herself to be privileged to grow up in a household where intellectual curiosity and academic excellence were valued above all else. The academic community that had initially been skeptical of their relationship had come to regard them as one of the most successful partnerships in modern academic life. Their research collaborations had produced significant advances in quantum physics, while their personal relationship had demonstrated that love could indeed flourish across generational boundaries when based on mutual respect and shared values. Margaret's influence continued to be felt in their lives through the foundation they established in her memory, which provided scholarships for women pursuing advanced degrees in science and literature. The Foundation's mission statement reflected Margaret's belief that education and love were the two most powerful forces for positive change in the world. As Charles approached his 90th birthday, he often marveled at the unexpected directions his life had taken. The conventional academic career he had planned had been enriched beyond imagination by his relationships with two extraordinary women. First Margaret, who had been his partner for over 50 years, and now Rebecca, who had brought new purpose and joy to his later years. Rebecca, now an established professor and researcher in her own right, reflected on how Margaret's dying wish had shaped her life in ways she could never have anticipated. The older woman's wisdom and generosity had created possibilities for happiness that transcended social conventions and professional boundaries. Their love story remained unconventional, but it had proven that meaningful relationships could develop in the most unexpected circumstances when people were brave enough to follow their hearts rather than societal expectations. Margaret's blessing had given them permission to pursue happiness, and they had built a life together that honored her memory while creating new traditions for their own family. The quantum entanglement that Margaret had once compared to love had become a perfect metaphor for their relationship. Two people connected across the vast distance of age and experience, affecting each other in ways that transcended ordinary understanding, bound together by forces that conventional wisdom suggested should not exist, but that proved undeniably real and transformative. Their story continued to inspire others in the academic community and beyond, demonstrating that love, learning, and family could flourish in forms that challenge traditional assumptions while honoring timeless values of respect, commitment, and intellectual partnership.